The dust motes danced in the shafts of morning light filtering through the small attic window as Elena Vasquez swept her feather duster across another stack of leather-bound books. 6 months of cleaning Mr. Harrison's sprawling estate, and this was her first venture into the attic. The space was surprisingly organized for a room rarely visited. Shelves of books, labeled storage boxes, and antique furniture draped in white sheets like slumbering ghosts. Elena wiped the perspiration from her brow with the back of her hand. August heat had transformed the attic into an oven, and she'd already discarded her standard-issue cleaning service cardigan, leaving just her pale blue uniform dress. She checked her watch, 11:30 a.m. Mr. Harrison wouldn't be back from his business trip until tomorrow evening, giving her ample time to tackle this long, neglected space. "Just get it done, Elena," she muttered to herself, the words dissolving into the hushed stillness of the attic. At 32, Elena hadn't imagined she'd be dusting the mansion of one of Boston's most eligible bachelors. She'd come to America with dreams of finishing her master's degree in literature, but her father's medical bills back in Mexico had quickly consumed her savings. Cleaning houses paid the bills while she took night classes, one painstaking credit at a time. Working for Alexander Harrison had been unexpectedly pleasant. Unlike her previous employers who treated her like she was invisible, Mr. Harrison, or Alex, as he'd insisted she call him when they were alone, always acknowledged her presence. He remembered details about her life, asked about her classes, and occasionally left her books from his extensive collection with thoughtful notes about passages she might enjoy. Elena moved methodically along the shelves, careful not to disturb the precise arrangement of items. Alex's organizational tendencies extended even to this forgotten space. She smiled, remembering how he'd apologized profusely the first time she'd found him rearranging the books she'd just organized in his study. "I have a system," he'd explained sheepishly. "It's a bit obsessive, I know." Her duster caught on something behind a row of boxes, sending a small avalanche of dust into the air. Elena coughed, waving her hand to clear the cloud. As the dust settled, she noticed a dark wooden chest partially hidden behind the storage containers. Unlike the other items in the attic, this chest bore no label, no identifying marker of any kind. Curiosity piqued, Elena carefully shifted the boxes aside. The chest was beautifully crafted from dark walnut with brass fittings, clearly an antique. A small brass lock secured the lid. Elena ran her fingers over the smooth wood, admiring the craftsmanship. She should probably leave it alone. Mr. Harrison was entitled to his privacy. But something about the hidden placement of the chest nagged at her. She turned to continue her cleaning when her elbow knocked against one of the boxes she'd moved, sending it tumbling to the floor. Its contents spilled across the worn wooden planks, old photographs, newspaper clippings, and a small brass key. Elena quickly gathered the scattered items, her eyes drawn to the key. It was small and ornate, the kind used for antique furniture or jewelry boxes. She glanced at the locked chest, then back at the key in her palm. Surely it couldn't be that simple. Before she could reconsider, Elena slipped the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. She hesitated, her hand resting on the lid. This was a violation of privacy, crossing a boundary she'd always respected. Yet something compelled her forward, perhaps the same instinct that helped her select books for him from the library, knowing intuitively what he might enjoy. "Just a peek," she whispered, lifting the lid slowly. Inside, she found dozens of envelopes, each one sealed and addressed simply, "Elena." Her breath caught in her throat as she lifted one of the envelopes with trembling fingers. The paper was heavy, expensive stationery, and her name was written in Alex's distinctive handwriting, sharp, precise strokes she recognized from the notes he sometimes left regarding household matters. This made no sense. Why would Alexander Harrison, CEO of Harrison Innovations and one of Boston's wealthiest men, write letters to his housekeeper? And why keep them locked away in his attic? With unsteady hands, Elena opened the envelope she was holding, unfolding the letter inside. "Elena, I watched you in the garden today, reading beneath the oak tree. You didn't notice me at the window, too absorbed in your book. There was a moment when something in those pages made you smile, a small, private smile that transformed your entire face. I found myself smiling too, though you couldn't see me. I wonder what it would be like to be the cause of that smile, to say something that would light up your eyes that way. I've rehearsed 100 conversations in my mind, yet when you're standing before me, I retreat to the safety of discussing household matters and weather. How does one tell their employee that they've come to be the brightest part of each day? That I find myself inventing reasons to come home early on the days you work? That I've memorized the sound of your footsteps in the hallway? The truth is, I've never been good at this, at reaching across the space between people. My world has always been one of transactions and clear boundaries. You dust my shelves, I sign your paycheck. You organize my life, I maintain a professional distance. But somewhere along the way, that distance has become unbearable. I know I will never send this letter. It will join the others in the chest, a testament to my cowardice. Perhaps someday I'll find the courage to speak these words aloud. Until then, I remain yours from afar. Elena's knees weakened, and she sank to the floor beside the chest, the letter clutched in her hand. This couldn't be real. She reached for another envelope, then another, opening each with increasing urgency. Each contained similar sentiments, observations of moments she hadn't realized he'd witnessed, thoughts he'd had while watching her work, reflections on conversations they'd shared. Some were dated from months ago, shortly after she'd started working for him. Others were more recent, including one from just last week. She'd caught him watching her in the library as she shelved books, and he'd quickly looked away, mumbling something about needing to return to work. The letter revealed what he'd wanted to say instead. Elena's mind reeled. Alexander Harrison had feelings for her. It seemed impossible. He moved in social circles she could only glimpse in magazines. His world was one of galas and boardrooms, while hers consisted of lecture halls and other people's dust. Yet the evidence lay scattered around her. Dozens of letters filled with a longing that mirrored her own carefully hidden feelings. She hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge her attraction to him. He was her employer, and she'd seen too many telenovelas about rich men and their maids to entertain such fantasies. Besides, Alex had always been respectful, never giving her reason to think his kindness was anything but the decency of a good man. But these letters, these honest, vulnerable confessions revealed a depth of feeling that transcended simple attraction. He noticed things about her that no one else did, how she always touched the spines of books before selecting one, the way she hummed fragments of Mexican folk songs while arranging flowers, her habit of standing by the window during rainstorms. Elena carefully returned the letters to their envelopes, her hands shaking slightly. What was she supposed to do with this knowledge? Pretend she'd never found them? Confront him? The power imbalance between them complicated everything. If she acknowledged the letters, would he think she was expecting something? Would she lose her job if she rejected him? Would she lose her heart if she didn't? A sudden noise from downstairs jolted her from her thoughts. The front door closing, footsteps in the foyer. "Elena?" Alex's voice called up the stairs. Her heart hammered in her chest. He wasn't supposed to be home until tomorrow. Elena hurriedly gathered the letters, returning them to the chest as quietly as possible. She closed the lid, the lock clicking into place just as footsteps sounded on the attic stairs. "There you are," Alex said, appearing in the doorway. "Didn't you hear me calling?" Elena rose quickly to her feet, painfully aware of the flush in her cheeks, the key still clutched in her palm. "Mr. Harrison, you're back early." He smiled, and Elena saw it now, the warmth in his eyes that she'd always attributed to general kindness. "The negotiations wrapped up sooner than expected. I thought I'd surprise you." Their eyes met, and for a breathless moment, Elena wondered if he somehow knew, if he could see the knowledge of his secrets written across her face. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his gaze moving to the chest behind her. "You look a bit flustered." Elena swallowed hard, her mind racing. Behind her lay a chest full of unspoken feelings. Before her stood the man who'd written them, unknowing that his most private thoughts were now shared. In her hand, she held the small brass key that had unlocked more than just a wooden chest. "Actually," she said softly, opening her palm to reveal the key, "I think we need to talk." Alex's expression shifted from confusion to recognition as his eyes fixed on the small brass key in Elena's palm. The color drained from his face. "Where did you find that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena's heart pounded against her ribs. There was no turning back now. "It fell out of one of the boxes while I was cleaning. I found the chest." A heavy silence filled the attic, disturbed only by the distant ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs and the soft rustle of wind through the eaves. Alex stood frozen in the doorway, his tall frame suddenly seeming smaller, more vulnerable. "I see," he finally said, running a hand through his dark hair, a nervous gesture she'd noticed during the rare occasions he was flustered. "And did you open it?" Elena nodded, unable to find her voice. She should apologize for the invasion of privacy, explain that it was an accident, but the words wouldn't come. Alex closed his eyes briefly, his jaw tightening. When he opened them again, there was resignation in his gaze. "I never intended for you to find those." "That much was clear from the hiding place," Elena said, attempting a small smile that didn't quite materialize. Her mind was still reeling, trying to reconcile the confident CEO who commanded boardrooms with the man who poured his heart out in letters he never meant to send. Alex moved into the attic, careful to maintain distance between them. He looked at the chest, then back at Elena. "How many did you read?" "Several," she admitted. "Enough to understand." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Well, this is mortifying." The word broke some of the tension, and Elena found herself releasing a nervous laugh. "More mortifying than finding out your boss has been secretly writing you love letters?" A flicker of a smile crossed his face. "Touché." He gestured to a pair of old armchairs draped in white sheets. "Maybe we should sit down for this conversation." Elena nodded, removing the sheets to reveal ornate Victorian chairs that had likely belonged to a Harrison ancestor. She sat perched at the edge, her back straight, hands folded tightly in her lap. Alex took the opposite chair, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, hands clasped before him. "I don't know where to begin," he said. "The beginning might be good," Elena suggested softly. Alex met her eyes. "The beginning was the day you interviewed for the position. You walked into my study wearing a navy blue dress and carrying a worn copy of Garcia Marquez. You were nervous, but trying not to show it. When I asked why you wanted to work here, you said you needed the money for school, but also that you'd read about my library and hoped I might not notice if you borrowed a book occasionally." Elena remembered that day clearly, how intimidated she'd felt by the mansion, by him, until that moment when he'd laughed at her honest admission and showed her the library, telling her she was welcome to borrow anything she liked. "I hired you on the spot," he continued, "not just because you were qualified, but because you brought something into this house that had been missing for a long time. Life. Warmth." He paused. "I never intended to develop feelings for you. It was unprofessional." "So you wrote letters instead," Elena said, understanding dawning. "Letters you never planned to send." Alex nodded. "It was a way to process what I was feeling without crossing lines. I knew the power imbalance between us made any expression of interest inappropriate. I'm your employer. I didn't want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable." Elena considered his words. The letters had revealed a deep respect for her, a concern for her comfort and happiness that aligned with the man she'd come to know over these months. Still, the situation was complicated. "I'm not sure what to say," she admitted. "This is unexpected." "You don't need to say anything," Alex assured her quickly. "In fact, if you'd prefer to forget this happened, I completely understand. I can arrange for you to work on days when I'm not home, or if you'd be more comfortable, I can help you find another position with an excellent reference." "Is that what you want?" Elena interrupted, surprised by the hurt that flared at the thought of not seeing him again. "God, no," Alex said emphatically. "That's the last thing I want. But what I want isn't the priority here. Your comfort is." Elena studied him, the earnestness in his expression, the careful way he was trying to give her control of the situation despite his own obvious discomfort. In his letters, he'd written about his fear of disrupting the easy friendship they'd developed, of making her feel that his kindness came with expectations. "I don't want to leave," she said finally, "but I'm not sure how we move forward from here." Relief washed over his features. "However you want to," he said. "We can pretend this never happened, or—" He hesitated. "Or?" Elena prompted. Alex took a deep breath. "Or we could talk. Outside of this house, somewhere neutral. Not as employer and employee, but as Alex and Elena." The proposition hung in the air between them. Elena considered the complications, the gossip if anyone saw them together, the questions it would raise, the risk to her job and reputation. But she also thought about the man revealed in those letters, the man who noticed the small details of her existence and treasured them. "I'd like that," she said softly. Alex's expression brightened, then quickly sobered. "Before you decide anything, there's something you should know." He stood and walked to the chest, unlocking it with a key from his pocket. "There's a reason I came home early." He removed a thick envelope from the chest and handed it to Elena. Unlike the others, this one was addressed to Ms. Elena Vasquez in formal typeface rather than his handwriting. "What is this?" she asked, turning the envelope over in her hands. "Open it," Alex said, returning to his seat. Elena carefully broke the seal and removed several official-looking documents. Her eyes widened as she read the letterhead, Harrison Educational Foundation. "I don't understand," she said, looking up at him. "It's a scholarship," Alex explained. "Full funding for the remainder of your master's program, plus a stipend for living expenses so you don't have to work while you study." Elena stared at him, speechless. The scholarship would change everything, allow her to complete her degree in a year instead of the 5 it would take at her current pace, free her from the constant worry about money, give her time to write the thesis she'd been piecing together in stolen moments. "Why?" she finally managed. "Because you deserve it," Alex said simply. "Your professors submitted glowing recommendations. The Foundation's board approved it unanimously last week. I was in New York finalizing the details." Elena shook her head, overwhelmed. "This is too much. I can't accept this." "You can," Alex insisted gently. "The scholarship has nothing to do with us. It's based entirely on your academic merit. The decision was made by the board, not by me. I recused myself from the vote." He leaned forward. "Elena, you're brilliant. You shouldn't have to clean houses to get your degree." She looked down at the papers in her hands. A lifeline, a way out, the opportunity she'd been working toward. Yet the timing made her uneasy. "I found these letters, and now you're offering me a scholarship that would make it impossible for me to continue working for you," she said slowly. "It feels connected." Understanding dawned in Alex's eyes. "You think this is a way to manage the situation? To buy you off?" He shook his head emphatically. "The scholarship was in process months before today. I plan to give you the news when I return tomorrow. Finding out about the letters, that's an uncomfortable coincidence." Elena wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered. "It's a lot to process all at once." "I know," Alex acknowledged. "Take the weekend to think about everything. The scholarship, the letters, all of it. No pressure, no expectations." He stood, moving toward the attic stairs. "I have meetings this afternoon. You can finish up here or leave early if you prefer. Whatever makes you comfortable." Elena remained seated, the scholarship papers still in her hands. "And if I accept the scholarship?" Alex paused at the doorway. "Then you'll have what you've worked so hard for. What happens between us, whether we become friends, more than friends, or nothing at all, that's entirely separate." After he left, Elena sat in the quiet attic, surrounded by dust motes and revelations. She reread the scholarship details, then reached into the chest and selected another letter at random, unfolding it carefully. "Elena, today, you told me about your father's surgery and how you've been sending most of your earnings home to Mexico. You spoke matter-of-factly, without complaint, though I could see the toll it's taking on you. The exhaustion from working 2 jobs, the worry that shadows your smile. I wanted to offer help, to solve this problem for you as I solve problems at work every day. But I recognized that impulse for what it was, my privilege speaking, my discomfort with witnessing struggle without fixing it. You weren't asking for rescue, you were simply sharing your reality. Instead, I asked about your father, his name, his favorite books, the stories he told you as a child, the way your face transformed as you spoke of him. It was like watching the sun emerge from behind clouds. I've spent my life surrounded by people who want things from me, my money, my influence, my connections. But you've never asked for anything beyond what you've earned. Your pride and independence humble me. Still, I find myself searching for ways to help that would honor rather than diminish you. Perhaps someday I'll find one. Yours, Alex." Elena folded the letter carefully, returning it to its envelope. The scholarship suddenly made more sense, not as a way to manage their complicated situation, but as the culmination of months of thought about how to help without overstepping. She gathered her cleaning supplies, her mind whirling with possibilities. By the time she descended the attic stairs, she had made at least one decision. She would meet Alex for that talk, somewhere neutral, as equals rather than employer and employee. The rest, she would figure out one step at a time. Elena's apartment was a far cry from the Harrison estate, a one-bedroom walk-up in Somerville with uneven floors and radiators that clanked like possessed machinery in winter. But tonight, with her small kitchen table covered in scholarship papers and Alex's letters, it felt like the epicenter of her universe. "Let me get this straight," Marisol said, refilling their wine glasses. "Your billionaire boss has been secretly writing you love letters for months, and now he's offering you a full scholarship to finish your degree?" Her roommate from freshman year and still her closest friend in Boston, Marisol had rushed over the moment Elena called. "He's not a billionaire," Elena corrected automatically. "Just a millionaire." Marisol rolled her eyes. "Oh well, that changes everything." Elena sighed, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "The scholarship isn't from him personally, it's from his family's foundation." "A foundation he controls," Marisol pointed out. "He recused himself from the vote." "Elena." Marisol set her wine glass down firmly. "You're missing the point. This man has feelings for you. Serious feelings, based on what you've told me. Are you sure this scholarship doesn't come with expectations?" Elena shook her head emphatically. "You don't know him, Mari. He's not like that. He was mortified that I found the letters. Of course he was. Men like that don't expose their vulnerabilities easily." Marisol picked up one of the letters Elena had brought home. "May I?" Elena nodded, watching as her friend read the carefully penned words. Marisol's expression softened. "Okay, I'll admit, this is surprisingly sweet. Not what I'd expect from a corporate shark." "He's more than his job," Elena said quietly. "Clearly." Marisol's shrewd eyes studied Elena. "The question is, how do you feel about him?" Elena had been asking herself the same question since leaving the Harrison estate that afternoon. She'd always found Alex attractive. It was impossible not to notice his tall frame, the way his blue eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he rolled up his sleeves when working late in his study. but she'd buried those observations deep, considering them inappropriate and pointless. "I don't know," she admitted. "I respect him. I enjoy our conversations. Sometimes I find myself looking forward to the days I work at his house." She traced the rim of her wine glass. "But he's my employer, Mari. Or he was." "The scholarship changes that," Marisol noted. "That's what concerns me. If I accept it, am I somehow entering into an unspoken agreement? If I don't, am I throwing away an incredible opportunity out of pride?" Marisol considered this. "What would you tell one of your students in this situation?" Before cleaning houses, Elena had taught literature at a community college in Mexico City. She still thought of herself as a teacher at heart. "I'd tell them to consider what they truly want, separate from fears or social expectations," Elena said slowly, "and to make the decision that best serves their goals, not someone else's." "So what do you want, Elena?" "Beyond finishing your degree." Elena stared at the scholarship papers. The answer had been crystallizing all evening, but she'd been afraid to acknowledge it. "I want to see if there could be something real between us. Not as employer and employee, but as equals." Marisol nodded, unsurprised. "Then accept the scholarship because it's right for you, and see him because you want to. Keep the two decisions separate in your mind." "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," Marisol conceded, "but it's straightforward. Be honest, with him and with yourself." Elena gathered the letters, returning them to her bag. "I'm meeting him tomorrow, at the MFA." "Neutral ground," Marisol approved. "What will you tell him?" Elena looked at her friend, a small smile forming. "The truth, that I'm terrified and intrigued in equal measure." "That," Marisol said, raising her glass, "is an excellent place to start." The Museum of Fine Arts was busy for a Saturday afternoon, tourists and locals alike wandering through the exhibits. Elena spotted Alex immediately. He stood before a large abstract painting, hands in the pockets of dark jeans, looking more casual than she'd ever seen him in a simple blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He hadn't noticed her yet, giving Elena a moment to calm her racing heart. She smoothed the skirt of her sundress, wishing she'd worn something more sophisticated. But this was who she was. A woman who bought clothes from clearance racks and wore the same pair of sandals until they fell apart. As if sensing her presence, Alex turned. His face brightened when he saw her, a smile spreading across his features. Elena's nervousness eased slightly. This was still the same man who discussed books with her while she dusted his shelves. "You came," he said when she reached him, the relief in his voice palpable. "I said I would." They stood awkwardly for a moment, the usual framework of their relationship stripped away. In his house, they knew their roles, employer and employee, with clear boundaries and expectations. Here they were just two people, and neither seemed quite sure how to proceed. "Have you been here before?" Alex asked finally, gesturing to the gallery around them. Elena nodded. "Many times. I come for the student nights when admission is free. The European paintings are my favorite." "Mine too," Alex said, "though I'm particularly fond of the Japanese prints. Would you like to see them?" The simple question broke the tension, giving them a direction. As they walked through the museum, their conversation gradually became more natural. Alex was knowledgeable about art, but never condescending, asking her opinions and listening attentively to her responses. When they reached the Japanese gallery, he pointed out a delicate woodblock print of a wave. "This reminded me of something you once said about feeling caught between two worlds, Mexico and America, your past and your future." Elena was touched that he remembered the conversation, a brief exchange they'd had months ago while she arranged flowers in his study. "You were listening." "I always listen to you, Elena," he said quietly, "even when I pretend to be absorbed in my work." The honesty in his voice made her breath catch. Here, away from the mansion and the power dynamics it represented, she could see Alex more clearly, not as Alexander Harrison, CEO, but as a man with uncertainties and hopes just like anyone else. They continued through the galleries, gradually relaxing in each other's company. By the time they reached the museum cafe, the initial awkwardness had dissipated entirely. Over tea and pastries, Elena finally broached the subject they'd been avoiding. "I've decided to accept the scholarship," she said, watching his reaction carefully. Alex's face lit up. "Elena, that's wonderful. The foundation will be thrilled. When will you start full-time studies?" "Next semester. I've already spoken with my department head. She thinks I can complete my degree within a year if I take an accelerated course load." "That's excellent news," Alex said, then hesitated. "And what about your position at the house?" Elena met his gaze steadily. "I think it's best if I give notice. Not immediately. I wouldn't leave you without help. But soon." Something like disappointment flickered across his face, though he quickly masked it. "Of course. I understand completely." "It's not because I don't want to see you," Elena clarified, her heart racing. "It's because I do, but not as your housekeeper." Alex went very still, his teacup halfway to his lips. "I see," he said carefully, setting the cup down. "And how would you want to see me?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Elena took a deep breath. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I'd like to find out, without the complications of you signing my paychecks." A slow smile spread across Alex's face, reaching his eyes. "I'd like that too," he said softly. "Very much." They finished their tea in a charged silence, both aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. As they walked through the remaining galleries, their hands occasionally brushed, each brief contact sending sparks up Elena's arm. Outside the museum, the afternoon sun was beginning to lower, casting long shadows across the steps. They paused at the top, neither quite ready to end their time together. "Would you like to get dinner?" Alex asked, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "There's a good restaurant just down the street." Elena hesitated. "One step at a time," she reminded herself. "Rain check? I promised Marisol I'd help her with something tonight." It wasn't entirely a lie. She had promised to call her friend with an update. If Alex was disappointed, he hid it well. "Of course. Another time." "I'd like that," Elena said. Then, before she could overthink it, she rose on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek. "Thank you for today, and for the letters, even if they weren't meant for me to read." Alex's eyes widened in surprise, his hand rising to touch the spot where her lips had been. "You're welcome," he said, a bit dazed. As Elena walked toward the tea station, she could feel his gaze following her. For the first time since finding the chest, she felt a sense of clarity. The path forward wasn't without complications, but it was one she wanted to explore. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Marisol. "Well, do I need to rescue you or celebrate with you?" Elena smiled, typing her response. "Neither yet. But I think celebration might be in our future." She was about to put her phone away when it buzzed again. This time, it was from Alex. "I just realized I never told you in person what I wrote so many times in those letters. You're extraordinary, Elena Vasquez. I've been half in love with you since the day you corrected my pronunciation of Garcia Marquez." Elena's steps faltered, her heart stuttering in her chest. She read the message twice more before responding. "Maybe next time. You can tell me in person." His reply came immediately. "I'm counting the days." Elena tucked her phone away, a smile spreading across her face as she descended into the subway station. Whatever came next would be complicated, messy, and entirely new territory for both of them. But for the first time in years, she was stepping into the unknown, not out of necessity, but out of choice. And that made all the difference. Elena's final 2 weeks at the Harrison estate passed in a strange limbo of old routines and new awareness. She continued her cleaning duties with the same care as always, but everything felt different. When she dusted the bookshelves in Alex's study, she found herself lingering over the titles he'd recommended. When she arranged fresh flowers in the entryway, she chose configurations she knew he'd appreciate. Each task was infused with the knowledge that soon she would no longer move through these rooms as an employee. Alex was mostly absent during her shifts, presumably to give her space. They communicated primarily through text messages, casual exchanges about books, museum exhibits, and occasionally more personal reflections that left Elena staring at her phone with a mixture of disbelief and warmth. At night, she often reread the letters she'd brought home, learning more about the man who had observed her so carefully from behind professional boundaries. On her last day, Elena found herself moving more slowly than usual, memorizing the details of a house she'd come to know intimately. The afternoon light filtering through the leaded glass windows in the library, the specific creak of the third stair, the way the kitchen smelled of lemon and rosemary even when no one had cooked for days. "Are you saying goodbye to the house?" Elena turned to find Alex leaning against the doorframe of the library, watching her with a gentle expression. He wore a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, clearly having come from a business meeting. "I suppose I am," she admitted. "It's silly, but I've grown attached to it." "Not silly at all." Alex stepped into the room. "This house has been in my family for 3 generations, but it never felt like a home until you started working here." Elena felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "It's a beautiful house. It just needed someone to care for it properly." "It needed you," Alex said simply. He moved closer, hands in his pockets, seemingly as uncertain as she felt about the new terrain they were navigating. "Are you finished for the day?" Elena nodded. "Just about. I've trained Maria on everything she needs to know. She's very experienced. She'll take good care of things." "I'm sure she will," Alex agreed, though his expression suggested the house wasn't his primary concern. "I was wondering if you might stay for dinner. I've cooked." Elena raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You cook?" A sheepish smile crossed his face. "Occasionally. Nothing fancy, but I make a decent risotto. Unless you have other plans?" She didn't, having deliberately left the evening open. Still, she hesitated. Dining in his home felt like blurring a boundary they'd only just established. Alex seemed to read her thoughts. "We could eat on the terrace," he suggested, more neutral than the dining room. The compromise eased her concerns. "In that case, I'd love to." An hour later, they sat on the stone terrace overlooking the garden, a bottle of wine between them and bowls of mushroom risotto that proved Alex hadn't been exaggerating his culinary skills. The evening was mild for September, the garden still vibrant with late summer blooms. "So, when do you start classes?" Alex asked, refilling her wine glass. "Monday," Elena replied, excitement evident in her voice. 3 courses this semester, then 4 in the spring. If all goes well, I'll defend my thesis next summer." "What's your thesis topic?" "The influence of magical realism in contemporary Latina literature," Elena said, then laughed self-consciously. "Not very original, I know." "I disagree," Alex said earnestly. "Your perspective as someone straddling 2 cultures gives you unique insight. I'd love to read it when you're ready to share." The genuine interest in his voice warmed her. "I'll hold you to that. Most people's eyes glaze over when I talk about magical realism." "I'm not most people," Alex replied with a small smile. "No," Elena agreed softly. "You're definitely not." The conversation flowed easily after that, moving from literature to music to travel. As twilight deepened into night, lights automatically illuminated the garden, creating a magical atmosphere that felt removed from the ordinary world. "May I ask you something personal?" Elena ventured after a comfortable lull in conversation. Alex nodded, setting down his wine glass. "Anything." "In your letters, you mentioned feeling isolated even among crowds of people. Is that why you wrote them? Because you felt you couldn't speak freely to anyone?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for a moment, considering his response. "Partially," he admitted finally. When you're in my position, people tend to tell you what they think you want to hear. Genuine connection becomes rare. He ran a finger along the stem of his glass. But it was more than that. Writing to you became a way to be honest with myself about what I was feeling. I've spent my life meeting expectations, my family's, the board's, society's. The letters were private space where I could just be Alex, not Alexander Harrison III. And who is Alex when he's not being Alexander Harrison III? Elena asked gently. A wry smile touched his lips. I'm still figuring that out. But I know he's someone who's been lonely for a very long time, even if he didn't recognize it until recently. He looked at her directly. Until you. The simple honesty of his words touched her deeply. Elena reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Thank you for telling me. Alex turned his hand to interlace their fingers, the contact sending warmth up her arm. Thank you for asking. Most people are more interested in Alexander than Alex. They sat like that for a long moment, connected by more than just their joined hands. When Elena finally pulled away, it was with reluctance. I should go, she said softly. It's getting late. Alex nodded, though disappointment flickered in his eyes. Of course. Let me call you a car. That's not necessary. I can take the tea. Elena, Alex said, his tone gently admonishing. It's nearly midnight. Please let me make sure you get home safely. She conceded, recognizing that his concern came from care rather than an attempt to control. While he arranged the car, Elena gathered her things, including the small box of personal items she'd kept at the house during her employment. At the front door, they faced each other awkwardly, neither quite sure how to end the evening. It wasn't a date exactly, but it wasn't a simple employer-employee farewell either. Thank you for dinner, Elena said. And for everything else. The opportunity, the scholarship, She gestured vaguely, unable to encapsulate all that had passed between them. You've earned it all, Alex assured her. The scholarship, the degree you're pursuing. I just removed some obstacles. The car pulled up in the circular driveway, its headlights illuminating them in the doorway. Alex stepped closer, his expression serious. May I see you again? Not here, somewhere of your choosing. Elena smiled, touched by his continued respect for her boundaries. I'd like that. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to step back if she wished. Instead, Elena rose on her tiptoes, meeting him halfway. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question rather than a declaration. When they parted, Alex's eyes remained closed for a moment, as if committing the sensation to memory. Good night, Elena, he said softly. Good night, Alex, she replied, his name, the informal version he'd always asked her to use, feeling different on her lips now. As the car pulled away, Elena looked back at the house. Alex stood in the doorway, a solitary figure framed by the grand architecture of his ancestral home. Something about the image struck her as profoundly lonely, despite the wealth and privilege it represented. She wondered not for the first time about the man behind the success and what it had cost him to become Alexander Harrison III. Elena Vasquez? Professor Rothman peered over his glasses at her. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your application was quite impressive. Elena sat across from the distinguished literature professor in his cluttered office, surrounded by teetering stacks of books and papers. With his bow tie and tweed jacket, Rothman looked like the quintessential academic. Thank you, Professor. I'm excited to be in your seminar. Harrison Foundation scholar, aren't you? He asked, shuffling through her file. Quite the achievement. Their selection process is notoriously rigorous. Elena nodded, unsure how much to reveal about her connection to the foundation. I was very fortunate. Nonsense, Rothman said dismissively. I've read your writing sample. Fortune had nothing to do with it. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. You're coming to us from community college teaching in Mexico City, I believe? Quite a transition. Yes, Elena agreed, though I've been in Boston for almost 2 years now. Working while studying part-time, Rothman noted, glancing at her file again. Commendable dedication. Well, Ms. Vasquez, I believe you'll find our program challenging but rewarding. I'm particularly interested in your perspective on magical realism as it relates to contemporary literature. They spent the next 30 minutes discussing her thesis topic, with Rothman offering suggestions for narrowing her focus and recommending additional sources. By the time she left his office, Elena felt both intellectually stimulated and overwhelmed. The campus buzzed with activity as students rushed between classes. Elena checked her schedule. She had 2 hours before her next seminar, perfect for coffee and reviewing the reading assignment. As she crossed the quad, her phone chimed with a text message. "How was your meeting with Rothman? Rumor has it he's brilliant but terrifying." Elena smiled at Alex's message. She'd mentioned the meeting during their last phone call, touched that he'd remembered. "Both true," she replied, "but I think he liked my thesis concept. At least he didn't throw me out of his office." "High praise indeed," Alex texted back. "Dinner tonight to celebrate? I know a quiet place where no one will recognize me." Elena hesitated. They'd seen each other twice since her last day at the house, once for coffee, once for a walk along the Charles River. Each meeting had been enjoyable, the connection between them deepening, but she was still cautious, aware of how much her life was changing all at once. "Rain check? I have a mountain of reading to get through. First week of grad school is no joke." His response came quickly. "Of course. Your studies come first. Lunch this weekend instead?" "Perfect," she replied, relieved by his understanding. "I'll call you tomorrow." As Elena tucked her phone away and headed toward the campus coffee shop, she felt a strange mix of emotions: excitement about her academic future, nervousness about her growing feelings for Alex, and beneath it all, a lingering sense of unreality, as if she might wake up tomorrow to find herself back in her old life, dusting shelves and dreaming of a future that seemed just out of reach. But this wasn't a dream. It was her new reality, with all its possibilities and challenges. And for the first time in years, Elena was moving towards something, rather than simply surviving. Whatever happened with Alex, she would always be grateful to him for that. The small bistro in Cambridge was crowded but not uncomfortably so, tucked away on a side street where tourists rarely ventured. Elena arrived 5 minutes early, sliding into a corner booth where she could watch the door. She'd changed outfits 3 times that morning, finally settling on a simple blue dress and cardigan, casual enough for lunch but still put together. It was strange, she reflected, to care so much about her appearance for a man who had seen her countless times in her cleaning uniform. Alex arrived precisely on time, scanning the room before his eyes landed on her. The smile that lit his face made Elena's heart flutter traitorously. He was dressed casually in dark jeans and a light sweater that brought out the blue of his eyes, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him at the mansion. "Sorry if I kept you waiting," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Traffic was worse than I expected." "You're exactly on time," Elena assured him. "Very CEO of you." He laughed, the sound warming her. "Old habits. My father believed tardiness was a cardinal sin." A waiter appeared with menus and water, giving them a moment to settle. When he departed, Alex leaned forward slightly. "How was your first week?" "Really?" Elena considered the question. "Overwhelming," she admitted. "Exciting. Terrifying. I keep waiting for someone to realize I don't belong there and escort me out." "Imposter syndrome," Alex nodded. "I felt the same way my first year running the company. Every board meeting I expected someone to stand up and announce I was a fraud." "You?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "Alexander Harrison III, with your Harvard MBA and birthright to the company throne?" A shadow crossed his face. "Especially me. My father left big shoes to fill and everyone knew it. He paused. Anyway, we were talking about you. What classes are you taking? Elena allowed the deflection, sensing he wasn't ready to discuss his father. She described her coursework: literary theory, feminist perspectives in Latin American literature, and a research methods seminar. Alex listened attentively, asking insightful questions that revealed his own love of literature. "You're in your element," he observed as their meals arrived. "I can hear it in your voice when you talk about your studies." "I am," Elena agreed, surprised by how true it was. "For years I've been fitting my education around work, around my father's medical bills, around other people's needs. Now I can just learn." "That's all I wanted for you," Alex said quietly. "The freedom to pursue what you love without obstacles." Elena studied him, struck again by the genuine care in his expression. In her experience, men with power rarely gave without expectation of return. Yet Alex had given her an opportunity that changed her life, asking nothing in response. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "Out of all the people who work for you, all the students who apply for scholarships, why invest so much in me?" Alex considered his answer carefully. "The easy explanation is merit. Your academic record is exceptional, your writing sample impressed the committee, and your professor's recommendations were glowing." He set down his fork. "But if I'm being completely honest, it started because I saw something in you that reminded me of myself. That hunger for knowledge, for understanding. The difference is, you never had the advantages I did. I wanted to level the playing field, just a little." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "Thank you," she said softly, "not just for the scholarship, but for seeing me, really seeing me." Their eyes held for a long moment, the connection between them almost palpable. Then the waiter appeared to refill their water glasses, breaking the spell. As they finished their meal, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Books they'd both read, places they'd traveled, films they'd enjoyed. Elena found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn in by Alex's dry wit and thoughtful observations. "Would you like to walk for a while?" Alex suggested after he'd paid the bill, despite Elena's protests. "It's a beautiful day." They strolled along the Charles River, where autumn was beginning to paint the trees in gold and crimson. Students jogged past, couples walked hand in hand, and children flew kites in the open spaces. Without conscious decision, Elena found her hand in Alex's, their fingers intertwined. "This feels nice," he said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "Normal." Elena understood what he meant. Outside the context of his mansion, away from the trappings of his wealth and position, they were just a man and woman enjoying a Saturday afternoon together. "Does your life often feel abnormal?" she asked. Alex considered the question. "Not abnormal to me, it's all I've known, but isolated, certainly. Prescribed?" He glanced at her. "Being with you is the first time in years I've felt like I'm making a choice rather than fulfilling an expectation." Before Elena could respond, a voice called out, "Alex? Alex Harrison?" They turned to see a couple approaching, the woman tall and elegant in designer casual wear, the man athletically built with perfectly coiffed silver hair. Elena immediately felt underdressed in her department store outfit. "Thomas? Diane?" Alex greeted them, his posture subtly shifting, shoulders straightening, voice taking on a more polished tone. "What a pleasant surprise." "We're just coming from brunch at the Riverside Club," the woman, Diane, explained, her curious gaze shifting to Elena. "Won't you introduce us to your friend?" "Of course," Alex said smoothly. "Elena Vasquez, this is Thomas and Diane Whitmore. Thomas sits on our board of directors. Elena is a graduate student at Boston University, specializing in Latin American literature." Elena noted the careful framing. No mention of her former employment, no explanation of how they knew each other. She understood the omission was meant to protect her from scrutiny, yet it still stung. "How fascinating," Diane said. her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "And how did you two meet?" Before Alex could craft another careful half-truth, Elena spoke up. "I used to work for Mr. Harrison," she said calmly. "I cleaned his house." The shock on the Whitmores' faces would have been comical in other circumstances. Thomas recovered first, his expression settling into something like amused condescension. "Well," he said with forced joviality, "Alex always did have an eye for talent." The implication hung in the air, unmistakable. Elena felt her cheeks burn, but before she could respond, Alex's hand tightened around hers. "Elena is a Harrison Foundation scholar," he said, his voice cool. "One of the most promising literary scholars in her program. Her background in education and her unique perspective on cross-cultural literature made her an exceptional candidate." The rebuke was clear. Thomas had the grace to look abashed, while Diane's smile became fixed and brittle. "How wonderful," she said. "Well, we should be going. Lovely to meet you, Ms. Vasquez. Alex, we'll see you at the charity gala next weekend?" "Of course," Alex confirmed. As the couple walked away, he turned to Elena, apology written across his features. "I'm sorry about that. Thomas is—" "It's fine," Elena interrupted, withdrawing her hand from his. "They weren't saying anything I haven't already thought myself." Alex looked stricken. "Elena, no. There's nothing inappropriate about us seeing each other. You don't work for me anymore." "But I did," she pointed out. "And to people like the Whitmores, I'll always be the maid you took a fancy to. The charity project who caught your eye." "That's not how I see you," Alex insisted. "Not how anyone who matters sees you." Elena sighed, suddenly tired. The encounter had punctured the bubble of their perfect afternoon, reminding her of the real-world complications they faced. "I know that," she said, "but it's still going to be part of our reality." They continued walking in silence, the easy companionship of earlier replaced by tension. When they reached the bridge, Elena stopped. "I should get back," she said. "I have reading to finish for Monday." Alex nodded, clearly disappointed but not pushing. "May I see you again next weekend? There's a visiting author speaking at the library, Javier Montoya. I know you admire his work." The thoughtfulness of the suggestion softened Elena's resolve. "I'd like that. I'll text you the details," he promised. He hesitated, then leaned down to place a gentle kiss on her cheek. "Thank you for today, Elena. All of it. Even the hard parts." As she watched him walk away, Elena felt conflicted. The afternoon had been wonderful until the Whitmores appeared. But perhaps the encounter was necessary, a reminder that their different worlds wouldn't merge easily, despite their growing feelings for each other. The male gaze in Marquez's work simultaneously objectifies and mystifies the female characters, rendering them symbols rather than fully realized individuals, Professor Rothman argued, pacing before the seminar table. "Wouldn't you agree, Ms. Vasquez?" All eyes in the small classroom turned to Elena. 2 weeks into the semester, she'd quickly developed a reputation for insightful comments and challenging questions, something that both pleased and unnerved her. "With respect, Professor, I see it differently," she began. "While female characters in Cien Años de Soledad are often viewed through male perspectives, they possess agency that subverts traditional power structures. Consider Ursula Iguaran, who outlives generations of men and ultimately holds the family's true power." Rothman's eyebrows rose, but a small smile played at his lips. An interesting counterpoint. Would you extend this analysis to his later works as well? The discussion continued, with other students joining in. Elena felt a thrill of intellectual engagement that surpassed any academic experience she'd had before. Here, her ideas were valued, her perspective sought after. She belonged. After class, Rothman asked her to stay behind. "Your analysis today was excellent, Ms. Vasquez," he said, gathering his papers. "You're bringing a fresh perspective that this department needs." "Thank you, Professor," Elena replied. pleased by the praise. "I'd like you to consider presenting at the graduate symposium next month," he continued. "Your work on female agency and magical realism deserves a wider audience." Elena's heart raced with excitement and apprehension. "That's a tremendous opportunity. I'm not sure I'm ready, but—" "You're ready," Rothman interrupted firmly. "The academic world needs diverse voices, particularly in Latin American literary criticism. Think about it, but don't think too long. The submission deadline is next Friday." As Elena left the building, her phone buzzed with a text from Alex, just checking in. "How was your day?" She smiled, typing back, "Professor Rothman wants me to present at the graduate symposium next month. I'm terrified and thrilled." His response came immediately. "That's fantastic. I knew they'd recognize your talent. Dinner to celebrate?" Elena hesitated. After their encounter with the Whitmores, she'd been more cautious, suggesting public activities rather than private meals. But today's triumph made her feel bold. "Yes," she replied, "but this time I'm cooking. My apartment. Friday at 7? The three dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. "Finally, I'd be honored. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," she answered, "and maybe a bottle of wine." As Elena headed toward the library, a sense of possibility expanded within her. Her academic career was taking flight, and despite the complications, her connection with Alex continued to deepen. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Elena surveyed her apartment with a critical eye. She'd spent the afternoon cleaning, a different kind of cleaning than she'd done at the Harrison estate, more frantic and personal. The small space gleamed, smelling of lemon cleaner and the chicken moles simmering on the stove. She'd pushed the mismatched furniture into the most pleasing arrangement possible, covered the worn spots on the couch with colorful pillows borrowed from Marisol, and arranged fresh flowers in a second-hand vase on the coffee table. Still, there was no disguising the fundamental modesty of her home. The water stain on the ceiling that the landlord perpetually promised to fix, the radiator that clanked like it was possessed, the windows that let in drafts during winter storms. After the grandeur of Alex's mansion, her apartment must seem like a dollhouse. "Stop it," she muttered to herself, stirring the mole. "This is your home. Be proud of it." The buzzer sounded precisely at 7. Elena smoothed her dress, a deep red that Marisol had insisted brought out the warmth in her complexion, and pressed the intercom. "Come on up." A minute later, a soft knock at her door. Elena took a deep breath and opened it to find Alex standing there, a bottle of wine in one hand and a small bouquet of lilies in the other. He'd traded his usual business attire for dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made him look younger, less like the CEO and more like the man from the letters. "These are for you," he said, offering the flowers. "Your apartment building is charming." Elena raised an eyebrow, taking the bouquet. "You don't have to be polite. I know it's a far cry from Commonwealth Avenue." "I mean it," Alex insisted, following her inside. "It has character, history." He glanced around her apartment with genuine interest. "Like these built-ins. They don't make craftsmanship like this anymore." His sincere appreciation eased Elena's self-consciousness. "The building was a factory before it was converted to apartments in the 70s, she explained, arranging the lilies in a second vase. "The floors are original." "I can tell," Alex said, admiring the worn but beautiful hardwood. "Something smells amazing." "Chicken mole," Elena said. "My grandmother's recipe. I hope you like chocolate and chilies together." "I'm sure I'll love it." He handed her the wine. "I wasn't sure what would pair well, so I asked the sommelier." Elena examined the label, relieved to see it wasn't outrageously expensive. Alex was learning her boundaries. "Perfect. Would you open it while I finish up?" As Alex located the corkscrew she'd left on the counter, Elena returned to the stove, suddenly nervous. She'd cooked for friends, for family, but never for a man she was dating? Was that even the right word for what they were doing? "Can I help with anything?" Alex asked, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "You can set the table," Elena suggested, nodding toward the small dining area. Plates are in the cabinet above the dishwasher. There was something surreal about watching Alexander Harrison III, whose net worth was reportedly in the hundreds of millions, setting her mismatched thrift store plates on her IKEA table. Yet he moved with ease, locating silverware in a drawer and folding paper napkins without being asked. "I'm not completely helpless domestically," he said, catching her surprised expression. "I lived alone in a studio apartment during my first year at Harvard Business School. My father thought it would build character." The revelation surprised her. "I assumed you'd always lived, well, like you do now." Alex shook his head. "The mansion was my inheritance after my father passed. Before that, I had a condo in Back Bay. Upscale certainly, but nothing like the family estate." He leaned against the counter, watching her work. "I lived on ramen and peanut butter sandwiches that year in the studio. I was determined to prove I could make it without my father's money." Elena could picture it, a younger, less polished Alex, stubbornly independent despite his privilege. "Did you? Make it without his money?" "For that year, yes," he admitted. "Then I gave in and accepted the trust fund disbursement. Pride gives way to practicality eventually." The self-deprecating honesty in his tone made Elena smile. She transferred the mold to a serving dish. "Dinner's ready." They sat at her small table, knees occasionally brushing in the limited space. Elena watched nervously as Alex took his first bite of the mole. His eyes widened. "This is extraordinary," he said after swallowing. "Complex and rich without being overwhelming. Did you really make this from scratch?" Elena nodded, pleased by his reaction. "The sauce takes hours. I started it last night." "I'm honored you went to such trouble," Alex said sincerely. "It's nothing compared to the meals I've eaten at your house," Elena replied. "Those were prepared by a professional chef," Alex pointed out. "This was made by you, which makes it infinitely more special." The genuine appreciation in his voice warmed her. They ate in comfortable conversation, discussing books, films, and Elena's progress on her symposium paper. It was only when they'd moved to the couch with their wine glasses that Alex broached the subject of their last meeting. "I've been thinking about the Whitmores," he said carefully, "about what you said afterward." Elena tensed slightly. "I overreacted. I was embarrassed, but—" "No," Alex interrupted gently. "You were right. There will be people who see our relationship through a cynical lens. People who won't understand what I see in you beyond the surface." "And what do you see?" Elena asked quietly. Alex set down his wine glass, turning to face her fully. "I see someone brilliant and determined. Someone who works harder than anyone I've ever met. Someone who notices beauty in places others overlook." His voice softened. "I see someone who makes me want to be better than I am." Elena's breath caught at the naked honesty in his expression. "And I see someone who's more than his name or his company," she replied. "Someone thoughtful and kind who notices details others miss." She hesitated, then added, "Someone who sees me, really sees me, when most of the world looks past." The air between them seemed charged with possibility. Alex reached out slowly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Elena," he murmured, the word itself a question. She answered by leaning forward, pressing her lips to his. Unlike their previous kiss, tentative and brief, this one deepened immediately. Alex's arms encircled her, drawing her closer as Elena's hands found their way to his shoulders, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath the soft sweater. The kiss was both gentle and urgent, a conversation without words. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Alex rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that properly since the moment you confronted me about the letters," he admitted. "What took you so long?" Elena teased, her fingers still entwined in the hair at the nape of his neck. "I was trying to be respectful," he said with a small smile. "Patient." "Maybe patience is overrated," she suggested, drawing him back to her for another kiss. Later, As they sat side by side on her small couch, Elena's head resting on Alex's shoulder while they talked, she felt a sense of rightness that transcended the differences in their backgrounds. Here, in her apartment, without the mansion and the staff and all the trappings of his wealth, they were just two people discovering each other. The simplicity of it was profound. Ms. Vasquez, your analysis of gender subversion in Rivera's work is compelling, but I'm not convinced by your application of Butler's performativity theory, Professor Rothman said, sliding her paper across his desk. The connection feels forced. Elena nodded, accepting the criticism. 3 months into the program, she'd learned that Rothman's direct feedback was a sign of respect, not disapproval. I struggled with that section, she admitted. The theoretical framework doesn't quite align with Rivera's magical elements. Precisely, Rothman agreed. Consider exploring Anzaldua's Borderlands theory instead. Her concepts of mestiza consciousness might provide a more organic framework for understanding the liminal spaces in Rivera's narrative. That's brilliant, Elena said, already mentally reorganizing her argument. Thank you, Professor. Rothman leaned back in his chair, studying her. Your symposium presentation was exceptional, by the way. Several of my colleagues mentioned it specifically. Pride warmed Elena's chest. The graduate symposium had been terrifying and exhilarating, standing before professors and peers, presenting her research on female agency in magical realism. The questions afterward had been challenging but engaged, suggesting her work had resonated. I'm considering submitting an expanded version to the Journal of Latin American Literary Studies, she ventured. You should, Rothman said without hesitation. Your perspective is fresh. With some refinement, it could make a significant contribution to the field. He shuffled some papers on his desk. Which brings me to another matter. The department is selecting candidates for the Fulbright program next year. Research opportunities in Mexico City for scholars focusing on Latin American literature. Elena's heart quickened. That sounds incredible. You should apply, Rothman said. The deadline is in February, giving you ample time to prepare a proposal. A year of research in Mexico could be transformative for your work. Elena left Rothman's office with her mind spinning. A Fulbright in Mexico. It was the kind of opportunity scholars dreamed about. The chance to conduct research in her home country, to access archives and scholars that would elevate her work to a new level. Yet as she crossed the campus, her excitement was tempered by a new consideration. Alex. In the 3 months since their dinner at her apartment, their relationship had deepened steadily. They saw each other several times a week, museum visits, quiet dinners, long walks along the river. He'd become integrated into her life in a way that felt both surprising and inevitable. What would a year apart mean for them? The question lingered as she entered the small cafe where Alex was waiting. He stood when he saw her, his face lighting up in a way that still made her heart skip. "How was your meeting with Rothman?" he asked after greeting her with a kiss. "Interesting," Elena said, settling across from him. "He suggested I apply for a Fulbright scholarship, a year of research in Mexico City." Alex's expression showed both pride and something like concern. "That's a tremendous opportunity, Elena. When would it start?" "Next September if I'm selected," she said, watching him carefully. "It's competitive, so it's a long shot anyway." "You should absolutely apply," Alex said firmly. "Your work deserves that kind of platform." "It would mean being away for a year," Elena pointed out softly. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're worried about us," he realized. "Elena, I'm not going anywhere. A year is nothing if it means advancing your career." His immediate support touched her deeply. "We've only been together a few months," she reminded him. "A lot could change in a year." Alex reached across the table, taking her hand. "Some things won't change," he said simply. "My feelings for you being one of them." The certainty in his voice both reassured and frightened her. They hadn't yet said the words, those 3 words that would transform what was between them from something exploratory into something defined, but they hovered there, unspoken, in moments like this. Then I'll apply, Elena decided. But let's not worry about it until there's something to worry about. Alex nodded, squeezing her hand gently. Agreed. Now tell me more about Rothman's feedback on your paper. As they talked, Elena felt a familiar sense of gratitude for how easily Alex understood her academic world, despite having no background in literature himself. He asked intelligent questions, remembered the names of theorists she'd mentioned weeks ago, and took genuine interest in her intellectual journey. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the Fulbright, the social differences between them, the uncertain future, Elena was increasingly certain that what they were building together was worth the effort. Snow fell in thick, lazy flakes outside the windows of Alex's study, transforming the garden into a pristine wonderland. Elena sat curled in an armchair by the fireplace, a book open in her lap, though her attention had drifted to the hypnotic dance of the flames. 5 months into their relationship, she'd grown comfortable in the spaces of Alex's home, no longer seeing it through the lens of an employee but as a regular visitor, a welcome guest. "Tea?" Alex asked, entering with a tray. He'd shed his usual formal attire for a soft sweater and lounge pants, his feet bare against the hardwood floors. "Thank you," Elena said, accepting the steaming mug. "This storm is supposed to continue all night. I might be snowed in." The corner of Alex's mouth quirked up. What a terrible fate, trapped in a mansion with a fully stocked kitchen and an extensive library. "And acceptable company, I suppose," she teased. Alex laughed, settling into the chair opposite hers. "How generous. How's the paper coming along?" Elena glanced at her laptop, open on the side table with her half-finished Fulbright proposal. Slowly, "I keep second-guessing my research question." "Read it to me," Alex suggested. Elena took a sip of tea, then recited her current draft. This project examines how contemporary female Mexican authors reclaim and transform magical realist traditions, creating literary spaces where cultural memory and feminist consciousness intersect to challenge historical narratives of national identity. "It sounds compelling," Alex said. "What's making you hesitate?" "It feels, I don't know, too academic, too removed from the actual literature I love." Elena sighed. "I want to sound scholarly without losing the passion that drew me to these works in the first place." Alex considered this. What if you started with a specific example? Something concrete to ground the abstract theory? Like an opening anecdote? Exactly. Something that illustrates why this matters. To literature, to Mexico, to you personally. Elena nodded slowly, ideas beginning to form. "That could work. Thank you." Alex smiled. "I may not understand all the literary theory, but I know a good story when I hear one, and your research is, at its heart, about stories that matter." His understanding of what drove her work touched Elena deeply. In the months they'd been together, Alex had shown genuine interest in her academic pursuits, reading drafts of her papers and asking thoughtful questions. In turn, she'd learned more about his business world, the challenges of leading a company with thousands of employees, the weight of decisions that affected so many lives. They worked in companionable silence for the next hour, the only sounds the crackling fire and the occasional click of computer keys. Elena found herself glancing at Alex periodically, still sometimes surprised to find herself here, in this life that had seemed impossible a year ago. "You're staring?" Alex noted without looking up from his laptop. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Elena admitted. "Last winter I was dusting these bookshelves and trying not to be caught looking at the titles." Alex set his computer aside, his expression softening. "And now?" "And now I'm borrowing your first editions and leaving coffee rings on your antique tables," she said with a small smile. "An improvement in every way," Alex declared, rising to add another log to the fire. "Though Maria does complain that you reorganize the books when you visit. Only because your system makes no sense," Elena protested. Who organizes novels by the color of their spines rather than by author? Someone with an aesthetic sensibility and a perfect memory for titles, Alex replied loftily, then laughed at her exasperated expression. Speaking of books, I have something for you. He crossed to his desk and removed a package wrapped in simple brown paper. I saw this and thought of you. Elena unwrapped it carefully to reveal a beautiful leather-bound edition of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's collected works in Spanish. Alex, she breathed, running her fingers over the embossed cover. This is exquisite. Open it, he urged. She did, finding a handwritten inscription on the first page. Para Elena, quien me enseñó que la realidad mágica existe en los espacios entre las personas. Con todo mi amor, Alex. For Elena, who taught me that magical reality exists in the spaces between people. With all my love, Alex. Elena looked up, her eyes shining. Con todo mi amor, she repeated softly. Is it too much? Alex asked, suddenly uncertain. I know we haven't explicitly said. Elena rose from her chair, crossing to him and placing her hands on either side of his face. It's not too much, she assured him. It's perfect, and I love you too. The words, finally spoken aloud, seemed to transform the air around them. Alex's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as he leaned down to kiss her, a kiss that held promise and certainty and a future unfolding before them. When they finally separated, Alex rested his forehead against hers. I've been waiting to say that for so long, he admitted. I didn't want to rush you. I've been feeling it for months, Elena confessed. I was just afraid of the intensity, of how much has changed so quickly, of how much I stand to lose if this doesn't work. It will work, Alex said with quiet conviction. We'll make it work. They sealed the promise with another kiss, the snow continuing to fall outside, cocooning them in their private world of firelight and newfound declarations. Ms. Vasquez, there's someone here to see you. Elena looked up from the library carrel where she'd been working on her thesis. The departmental secretary stood in the doorway, looking somewhat flustered. Did they give a name? Elena asked, marking her place in the text she'd been annotating. He says he's your father? Elena's heart skipped a beat. Her father was supposed to be in Mexico City, recovering from his most recent surgery. She hadn't expected to see him until summer, when she planned to visit. Where is he? She asked, gathering her papers hastily. Waiting in the department lounge, the secretary replied. Elena rushed down the hallway, her mind racing. Had something happened? Was he worse? The medical bills she'd been helping pay had decreased in recent months as his condition improved, but still. She pushed open the lounge door and there he was, Francisco Vasquez, looking thinner than she remembered but standing without the cane he'd needed for years. His face, weathered by time and illness, broke into a wide smile when he saw her. "Papa!" Elena exclaimed, rushing to embrace him. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "Everything is wonderful, mija," he assured her, holding her at arm's length to look at her properly. "The doctor cleared me for travel and I wanted to surprise you." "But the expense, the flight, your apartment—" "All taken care of," Francisco said, leading her to sit on one of the lounge sofas. "My health is much improved and I've been saving. I wanted to see where my brilliant daughter studies. Your professors speak very highly of you." "You've met my professors?" Elena asked, bewildered. "Just Dr. Rothman, briefly, a very serious man." Francisco's eyes twinkled. "He told me you're the most promising student in the program." Pride and confusion warred in Elena's mind. "How long have you been here? Where are you staying?" "I arrived yesterday. I'm at a small hotel near the campus. I'm here for 2 weeks, long enough to see Boston and attend this symposium where you're presenting next Friday." Elena's mind whirled. She hadn't told her father about the upcoming symposium, not wanting him to feel bad about missing it. "How did you know about that?" Francisco looked slightly uncomfortable. "Your young man mentioned it when he called to arrange my travel." My young man? Elena repeated faintly. Alex contacted you? Si, about a month ago. Very polite, very respectful. He wanted to surprise you but needed my help. I was hesitant at first. You hadn't told me about him, but he explained everything. Her father's expression grew serious. You should have told me, Elena. About him, about the scholarship, about how things have changed for you here. Guilt washed over Elena. She'd been vague in her communications with her father, not wanting to worry him with the complexities of her relationship with Alex, unsure how to explain the scholarship without raising questions. I'm sorry, Papa. I wanted to tell you in person when I visited this summer. It's complicated. Love usually is, Francisco said with surprising gentleness. But from what I've heard, this Alexander seems to care deeply for you. He does, Elena confirmed, and I care for him. But there are challenges, our different backgrounds, the way people see us together. Ah, Francisco nodded in understanding. You worry people think you're with him for his money. Elena winced at the blunt assessment, or that he's with me as some kind of exotic diversion. And what does Alexander say about these concerns? He says they don't matter, that what's between us is what counts. A wise man, Francisco observed. Mija, I've watched you carry the weight of our family's struggles on your shoulders for years. You put your dreams aside to help me, to send money home. Perhaps it's time to allow yourself happiness without guilt. Elena's eyes filled with tears. It's not that simple, Papa. It never is, he agreed. But don't create obstacles where none exist. This man arranged for your old father to attend your symposium because he knew it would bring you joy. That tells me something about his character. Before Elena could respond, the lounge door opened and Alex himself appeared, looking slightly breathless. I'm so sorry I'm late, he said, crossing to shake Francisco's hand. The board meeting ran over. It's wonderful to see you again, Mr. Vasquez. Please call me Francisco, her father insisted. We were just discussing you. Alex glanced at Elena, noting her emotional state. All good things, I hope? The best, Francisco assured him. Now, you promised to show me this famous Boston of yours before dinner. I'd be honored, Alex said. Elena, will you join us? Elena looked between the two men, her father, who had sacrificed so much for her education, and Alex, who had created this moment of connection between her two worlds. The gesture was so thoughtful, so perfectly aligned with what would matter to her, that any lingering reservations about his surprise melted away. I wouldn't miss it, she said, gathering her belongings. As they left the building together, Elena noticed several of her classmates watching with undisguised curiosity. For once, she didn't mind the attention. Let them see. Let them wonder. The people who mattered understood the truth of what existed between her and Alex. Francisco looped his arm through hers as they walked. I like him, he said quietly, nodding toward Alex, who had stepped ahead to hail a taxi. He looks at you the way your mother looked at me, like you are the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life. Elena squeezed her father's arm, too moved to speak. Outside, the Boston spring was in full bloom, the trees lining Commonwealth Avenue heavy with blossoms that drifted down like snow when the breeze stirred. Alex turned back to them, his face lighting up when he caught Elena's eye. And in that moment, everything, their different worlds, the challenges ahead, the uncertainties of the future, seemed manageable in the face of what they'd found together. Congratulations to this year's Fulbright recipients, Dean Matthews announced, gesturing to the small group of scholars gathered on the stage. Your research will represent Boston University's commitment to global academic excellence. Applause filled the reception hall as Elena stood among her fellow recipients, trying to appear composed despite the elation bubbling inside her. After months of work on her proposal, weeks of interviews, and agonizing days of waiting, the official announcement had finally come. She would spend the next academic year researching in Mexico City. From the front row, Alex caught her eye and smiled, his pride evident even from a distance. Beside him sat Francisco, who had extended his visit by another week after Elena received the preliminary notification. Professor Rothman was there too, his usual stern expression softened by satisfaction at his student's achievement. After the ceremony, well-wishers surrounded Elena, classmates, professors, university administrators. She accepted their congratulations graciously, still somewhat dazed by the reality of her accomplishment. When Alex finally reached her side, he simply squeezed her hand, knowing that public displays of affection would make her uncomfortable in this setting. "I'm so proud of you," he said quietly. "We both are," Francisco added, embracing his daughter. "Though I admit, I have selfish reasons to be pleased. Having you in Mexico City for a year means I'll see you much more often." "That's definitely a benefit," Elena agreed, her eyes shining. The thought of regular visits with her father during her research year was almost as exciting as the scholarship itself. Professor Rothman approached, nodding formally to Alex and Francisco before turning to Elena. "Well deserved, Ms. Vasquez. Your proposal was exceptional." He glanced at Alex. "Mr. Harrison, I trust you realize the significance of your friend's achievement. The Fulbright is among the most prestigious scholarships in academia." "I'm well aware, Professor," Alex replied smoothly. "Elena's work deserves this recognition and more." Something in his tone made Elena suspect this wasn't their first conversation about her academic merits. She wondered if Rothman had initially assumed Alex's influence had played a role in her selection, a suspicion she herself had wrestled with until the committee chair had specifically praised elements of her proposal that Alex had never seen. "Will you join us for dinner, Professor?" Francisco asked. "We're celebrating at Madeira." Rothman's eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants. "Another time, perhaps. I have papers to grade." He nodded to Elena. "Enjoy your evening. We'll discuss your research schedule next week." As Rothman departed, Francisco excused himself to use the restroom, leaving Elena and Alex momentarily alone. "Madeira?" Elena questioned. "That wasn't the plan." Alex had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I may have upgraded our reservation. This is a special occasion." "Alex," Elena began, a familiar tension creeping into her voice. "We agreed. I know. No extravagant gestures." He raised his hands in surrender. "But this isn't about me trying to impress you with expensive restaurants. This is about celebrating properly. Your father is here, you've just received a prestigious scholarship, and I—" He hesitated, then continued more quietly. "I want to create memories with you before you leave for a year." The reminder of their impending separation softened Elena's resistance. "When you put it that way, I suppose I can tolerate one fancy dinner." Alex grinned. "Your sacrifice is noted." Later, as they dined in Madeira's elegant surroundings, Elena found herself actually enjoying the experience. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, offering panoramic views of Boston Harbor. The food was exquisite, the service impeccable, and most importantly, the company perfect. Francisco was in rare form, sharing stories of Elena's childhood determination, how she'd taught herself to read before starting school, how she'd organized a neighborhood library from her own books, how she'd corrected her high school literature teacher's analysis of Don Quixote. "She's always been fearless with her opinions," Francisco concluded, raising his glass. "To my brilliant daughter, who will change how the world understands literature." "To Elena," Alex echoed, his eyes warm with affection. As they clinked glasses, Elena felt a momentary pang at the thought of leaving this, her father and Alex together, the life she'd built in Boston, the relationship that had transformed her understanding of love. Yet alongside that pang was excitement for the journey ahead, the research that would form the foundation of her academic career. You're thinking about Mexico City, Alex observed as Francisco excused himself to take a call from his doctor. Elena nodded. Is it that obvious? Your expression gets distant when you're mentally planning research. It's rather adorable. Alex reached across the table, taking her hand. It's going to be an amazing year for you. But difficult for us, Elena said, voicing the concern that had lingered since she'd submitted her application. Difficult, yes. Impossible, no. Alex squeezed her hand. We'll make it work. I have more frequent flyer miles than I could use in a lifetime, and Mexico City has excellent internet for video calls. Elena smiled at his practicality. You've thought about this. I've thought about little else since you told me you were applying, Alex admitted. I won't pretend I'm thrilled about spending a year apart, but I am thrilled about what this opportunity means for you. His unwavering support touched her deeply. How did I get so lucky? I ask myself the same question every day, Alex replied, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that still made her heart race. Now, what do you say we order dessert? The chocolate soufflé here is apparently life-changing. Are you sure about this? Elena asked, adjusting the emerald earrings Alex had given her for her birthday. These people are your business associates, your friends. I'm going to stick out like the brilliant, beautiful woman you are, Alex suggested, straightening his bow tie in the mirror beside her. They stood in his bedroom, a space that had become increasingly familiar to Elena over the past 8 months of their relationship. Tonight was the annual Harrison Foundation Gala, a high-profile charity event that raised millions for educational initiatives. It would be their first major public appearance as a couple. You know what I mean, Elena insisted. Half of Boston's elite will be there, and they all know I used to clean your house. Alex turned to face her, his expression serious. Elena, you're attending as my partner and as a Harrison Foundation scholar, both roles you've earned through your own merit. Anyone who sees you differently isn't worth our concern. Elena smoothed the skirt of her gown, a deep emerald silk that complemented the earrings. The dress had been a splurge, even with her increased stipend from the Fulbright, but tonight she wanted to feel confident, prepared. I know you're right, she sighed. I just can't help worrying about embarrassing you. The only way you could embarrass me is if you started discussing my teenage goth phase, Alex said with mock seriousness. My mother keeps threatening to bring the photos. Despite her nerves, Elena laughed. Now I'm definitely looking forward to meeting your mother. She's looking forward to meeting you too, Alex assured her. She's heard nothing but good things. From you, maybe. I'm sure the Whitmores and their friends have been less complimentary. Alex's jaw tightened slightly. The Whitmores won't be there tonight. Thomas resigned from the board last month. This was news to Elena. Why? Let's just say I made it clear that his attitudes weren't compatible with the Foundation's values, Alex said cryptically. Now, are you ready? The car will be here in 5 minutes. The ballroom of the Four Seasons was transformed for the gala. Sparkling chandeliers, elegant floral arrangements, and subtle lighting that made everyone look their best. As Elena entered on Alex's arm, she felt the weight of curious gazes but took strength from his steady presence beside her. Alex, darling. A striking woman in her 60s approached, her silver hair swept into an elegant updo. I've been looking everywhere for you. Mother? Alex greeted her warmly, kissing her cheek. May I introduce Elena Vasquez? Elena, this is my mother, Catherine Harrison. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Catherine said, taking Elena's hands in hers. Alexander speaks of little else these days. The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Harrison, Elena replied, relieved by the genuine warmth in the older woman's manner. Please call me Catherine, and you must tell me about your research. Alex says you've received a Fulbright? As they conversed, Elena gradually relaxed. Catherine was surprisingly knowledgeable about Latin American literature, having traveled extensively in the region during her youth. Their discussion was interrupted periodically as various guests approached to greet Alex, but he made a point of including Elena in each conversation, subtly emphasizing her academic credentials. During dinner, Elena found herself seated between a university president and the CEO of a tech company. Initially intimidated, she soon discovered that genuine intellectual curiosity transcended social barriers. By dessert, she was deep in conversation about the intersection of technology and literary analysis, explaining how digital tools were transforming research in her field. "Your young woman is quite impressive," Elena overheard the university president telling Alex later. "We could use more scholars with her interdisciplinary perspective." "She is impressive," Alex agreed, "though not my young woman so much as her own person." The gentle correction made Elena smile as she approached. "Defending my autonomy?" "Always," Alex said, slipping an arm around her waist. "Having a good time?" "Surprisingly, yes," Elena admitted, "though I did have to deflect 3 questions about how we met." "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That I worked for you while pursuing my degree, and we connected over a shared love of literature." She shrugged. Simple but accurate. Alex's expression softened. "Have I told you tonight how much I love you?" "Not in the last hour," Elena teased. "A serious oversight," he murmured, leaning closer. "Elena Vasquez, you are extraordinary, and I love you more than I can express in either of your languages." Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the event coordinator announcing the start of the fundraising auction. Alex was needed on stage as foundation chairman, leaving Elena momentarily alone. "He's quite taken with you," Catherine observed, appearing at her side. "I haven't seen him this happy in years." "I feel the same way," Elena admitted, "though I worry about the year ahead with me in Mexico City." Catherine's gaze was shrewd but kind. Distance tests relationships, certainly, but it also clarifies what matters. She patted Elena's arm. "And anyone can see that you matter a great deal to my son." On stage, Alex was speaking about the Foundation's mission, his passion evident in every word. As he described how education had transformed lives, including those of the scholars present tonight, his eyes found Elena in the crowd, a private moment of connection amid the public event. Whatever challenges the coming year might bring, Elena knew with certainty that what they had built together was strong enough to endure. Not because of grand gestures or passionate declarations, but because of moments like this, quiet understanding, mutual respect, and the simple joy of being seen for exactly who you are. Elena surveyed the organized chaos of her apartment, half-packed suitcases, stacks of books sorted by priority, piles of clothing she was still deciding whether to take or store. After nearly 3 years in this small space, she was surprised by how much she'd accumulated. The prospect of condensing her life into 2 suitcases and a carry-on was daunting. "I think you need to accept that you can't bring your entire library," Marisol observed, perched on the edge of Elena's bed. "Mexico City does have bookstores, you know." "But these are my annotated copies," Elena protested. "My research notes are in the margins." "Then scan the important pages," Marisol suggested practically. "Or better yet, let your rich boyfriend buy you a tablet so you can digitize everything." Elena rolled her eyes. "He's offered 3 times, but I prefer physical books." "Luddite," Marisol teased, then grew serious. "Speaking of Alex, how are you two handling the impending separation?" Elena folded a sweater, considering the question. "Better than I expected, actually. We've talked through how we'll stay connected. Regular video calls, visits when possible. He's already booked flights for October and December." She smiled faintly. "He's very organized about it all. He made a shared calendar." "Of course he did," Marisol said with affectionate exasperation. "The man probably color codes his sock drawer." "Only the dress socks," Elena replied, deadpan. When Marisol's eyes widened, she laughed. "I'm kidding. Mostly." Marisol joined her laughter, then reached for Elena's hand. "I'm going to miss you, you know. Who's going to force me to attend poetry readings and foreign films? Alex has promised to keep an eye on you, Elena informed her. He's under strict instructions to make sure you don't spend the entire year watching reality TV. Traitor, Marisol muttered, but her eyes were fond. It's still strange to think of you and Alexander Harrison as a couple. Remember when you used to call him Mr. Harrison and panic if you were 5 minutes late to work? Elena shook her head, the memory feeling distant yet vivid. That feels like another lifetime. It was another lifetime, Marisol said softly. Look at you now, Fulbright scholar, published in academic journals, dating one of Boston's most eligible bachelors. You're living the dream, girl. Not quite how I imagined it, Elena admitted, but yes, I'm very fortunate. Her phone chimed with a text message. Alex, dinner at 7 still works? Bringing the contract for the apartment sublease. Speaking of your good fortune, Marisol said, glancing at the message over Elena's shoulder. Elena typed a quick affirmative response. The apartment in Mexico City had been a point of contention. Alex had wanted to rent something luxurious in an upscale neighborhood, while Elena insisted on a modest place closer to the university archives. They'd compromised on a charming apartment in Coyoacán, not far from Frida Kahlo's Blue House, with enough space for a small home office but not so lavish as to make Elena uncomfortable. I should finish packing, Elena said, turning back to the suitcase. My flight's in 3 days, and I still have 1,000 things to do. Marisol stood, gathering her purse. I'll leave you to it. But don't forget our farewell dinner tomorrow night. Everyone's coming. Your cohort from the department, some of the faculty, even that grumpy Professor Rothman. After Marisol left, Elena continued sorting and packing, her mind drifting between practical concerns and deeper reflections. A year away from Boston, a year of immersive research in her home country, a year of physical distance from Alex. The last thought brought a familiar pang. Despite the careful planning, despite the technology that would keep them connected, despite Alex's unwavering support, the reality of their separation loomed large. They had become so integrated into each other's daily lives. Early morning coffee before Elena headed to campus, quiet evenings reading in companionable silence, weekend explorations of New England's small towns. How would they maintain that intimacy across thousands of miles? Elena was still pondering this question when Alex arrived that evening, a folder of documents in one hand and takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant in the other. The apartment contract as promised, he said, setting the food on her small kitchen counter. And dinner, because I suspected you'd forget to eat while packing. Elena smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. You know me too well. Not well enough, Alex replied softly. I'm hoping for a lifetime to learn all the details. The simple statement, delivered without drama or artifice, made Elena's heart swell. In the year they'd been together, Alex had never pressured her about their future, never pushed for commitments beyond what she was ready to give. Yet moments like this, casual references to a shared lifetime, revealed the depth of his feelings. As they ate, seated cross-legged on cushions around her coffee table, they discussed practical matters, the sublease agreement, the research stipend disbursement schedule, the contact information for the university liaison in Mexico City. Alex had helped navigate the administrative details with his usual efficiency, making what could have been an overwhelming process manageable. Your father confirmed he'll meet you at the airport? Alex asked, adding more pad thai to her plate. Elena nodded. He's already planning a welcome dinner with his cousins. I think half of Mexico City might be invited. I wish I could be there, Alex said, a rare note of wistfulness in his voice. Me too, Elena admitted. But your board meeting, I know. Quarterly financials wait for no man. He sighed. Still, it's hard to think of you starting this adventure without me there. Elena reached across the table, taking his hand. You'll be there for so many other moments. October isn't that far away. 43 days, Alex said immediately, then looked embarrassed. Not that I'm counting. Of course not, Elena teased, squeezing his hand. After dinner, they tackled her packing together, Alex bringing his organizational skills to the chaos. He didn't comment on the number of books she'd deemed essential, simply found creative ways to fit them into her luggage. When they'd done as much as possible for one evening, they curled together on her small couch, Elena's head resting on his chest. "I have something for you," Alex said after a comfortable silence. "A going-away present of sorts." "Alex?" Elena began, wary of extravagant gifts. "It's not what you think," he assured her, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet pouch, placing it in her palm. "Open it." Inside, Elena found a delicate silver chain with a small key pendant. The key was antique in design, its bow intricately worked with tiny flowers. "It's beautiful," she said, genuinely touched. "But I don't understand." "It's a replica of the key to the chest," Alex explained. "The one where I kept the letters. I had it made from the original." Understanding dawned, along with a rush of emotion. The key that had started everything, that had unlocked not just a wooden chest, but the possibility of them. "I thought," Alex continued, "that you could wear it while you're away. A reminder of how we began, and that some things remain locked away safely until we're together again." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "This is perfect," she whispered, removing the necklace from its pouch. "Will you put it on me?" Alex fastened the chain around her neck, his fingers warm against her skin. The key nestled just below her collarbone, a tangible connection to their shared history. "I love you," she said, turning to face him. "And I'm going to miss you terribly." "I love you too," Alex replied, brushing a tear from her cheek. "And while I'll miss you every day, I'm so proud of what you're doing. This year is going to be transformative for your work." They spent the night together, making love with a tender urgency born of their impending separation, then talking late into the night about everything and nothing, memories of their early encounters, dreams for the future, the small details of daily life they would miss about each other. The departure gate at Logan Airport was crowded with late summer travelers, families returning from vacations, students heading to distant universities, business people on their way to meetings. Elena and Alex stood slightly apart from the flow of travelers, his arms around her waist, her head against his chest. "You have your passport?" Alex asked for the third time. "Yes," Elena confirmed patiently. "And the letter from the Fulbright Commission? And your research proposal? And the contact information for the university liaison?" "All safely in my carry-on," she assured him, "along with my laptop, tablet, chargers, and 3 paperbacks for the flight." Alex smiled ruefully. "I'm being ridiculous, aren't I?" "A little," Elena admitted. "But it's sweet." The boarding announcement for her flight echoed through the terminal. Final call for passengers. "That's me," Elena said softly. Alex tightened his arms around her. "Call me when you land, even if it's the middle of the night." "I will." She reached up to touch the key pendant at her throat. "And we'll talk tomorrow evening, as planned." "I've already set up the video call," Alex confirmed. 7 o'clock your time, 6 here." They kissed, a kiss that needed to convey so much: love, longing, promise, farewell. When they separated, both had tears in their eyes. "This isn't goodbye," Alex said firmly. "It's just until October." "Until October," Elena agreed. She touched his face, memorizing the feel of him. "Take care of yourself. Don't work too hard." "Says the woman who's about to dive into intensive research," Alex teased gently. "You're one to talk about working too hard." Elena smiled through her tears. "We'll remind each other to take breaks." With a final kiss, she turned toward the gate, her steps reluctant but determined. At the entrance, she looked back one last time. Alex stood where she'd left him, tall and steady, his eyes never leaving her. He raised a hand in farewell, and she mirrored the gesture before stepping onto the jetway. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Elena gazed out the window at the Boston skyline receding in the distance. The city had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined when she'd arrived 3 years ago with nothing but determination and dreams. She was leaving with so much more: academic recognition, professional opportunities, a network of mentors and colleagues, and most unexpectedly, a love that had rewritten her understanding of possibility. The key pendant rested against her skin, a constant reminder of what waited for her return. As the plane lifted into the clouds, Elena closed her eyes, letting herself feel the complex mix of emotions: sadness at the separation, excitement for the work ahead, and beneath it all, a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, poised between what had been and what might be. Mexico City beckoned with its rich archives and literary history. Boston held her heart and future. For the next year, she would live between these worlds, straddling countries and cultures as she had all her life, but now with a clearer sense of belonging in both. The Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico's archives smelled of old paper, leather, and time. Elena sat at a corner desk, surrounded by rare first editions and fragile manuscripts, taking careful notes on her laptop. After 8 months in Mexico City, she had settled into a productive routine: mornings in the archives, afternoons writing in her apartment or local cafes, evenings connecting with family or calling Alex. Today's discovery had been particularly exciting: an unpublished correspondence between 2 female Mexican authors from the 1950s, discussing their deliberate subversion of magical realist tropes to address women's experiences. The letters provided concrete evidence for a central argument in Elena's research, connecting theoretical concepts to the actual intentions of the authors. "You're smiling at that letter like it's a love note," observed Lucia, a fellow researcher who had become Elena's friend and occasional research assistant. "In a way it is," Elena replied, carefully photographing the letter for her records. Proof that these women were consciously developing a feminist counter-narrative decades before critics acknowledged it. "Your advisor will be thrilled," Lucia said, gathering her own materials. "Are we still on for coffee tomorrow?" Elena nodded, checking the time. 4 o'clock. "But I need to leave now. I have a call with Alex in 30 minutes. "Ah, the daily check-in with Boston," Lucia teased gently. "Tell him I said hello." As Elena packed her materials, her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Dinner at my place tonight? Rosa is making chiles rellenos. Wouldn't miss it." 7 p.m., she responded, touched by how seamlessly she had reintegrated into her father's life during these months in Mexico. His health had continued to improve, and she treasured the opportunity to spend this time with him, an unexpected blessing of her research year. The walk from the university to her apartment in Coyoacán took 20 minutes, the April afternoon warm but not yet unbearable. Elena loved these walks, observing the vibrant street life of Mexico City, so different from Boston's reserved New England atmosphere. Street vendors called out their wares, children played in parks, and the scent of street food mingled with exhaust and flowering trees. In her apartment, the perfect compromise she and Alex had negotiated, Elena set up her laptop on the small balcony overlooking a courtyard filled with bougainvillea. Right on time, the video call connected, revealing Alex in his home office, early morning light filtering through the windows behind him. "There you are," he said, his face lighting up. "How was the archive today?" "Incredible," Elena replied, launching into an explanation of her discovery. As always, Alex listened attentively, asking insightful questions that helped her clarify her thoughts. Though not an academic himself, he had become so familiar with her research that he could engage meaningfully with her findings. "This sounds like the missing piece you've been looking for," he observed when she'd finished explaining. "I'm so proud of you, Elena. Thanks to your suggestion about cross-referencing the publisher's records," she acknowledged. "That's what led me to these letters." "Teamwork," Alex said with a smile. "Speaking of which, did you get the package I sent? It should have arrived yesterday." "Yes, the books are perfect," Elena confirmed. How did you find a first edition of Castellanos in Boston? I have my sources, Alex said mysteriously. Actually, a rare book dealer I know located it in Chicago. I thought it might be useful for your comparison chapter. These thoughtful gestures had become part of their long-distance relationship. Books shipped across continents, articles forwarded with notes in the margins, small surprises that showed each was thinking of the other despite the separation. How are the preparations for your visit next month? Elena asked, shifting topics. Did you book the cultural tours I recommended? Alex's expression changed subtly, a flicker of something Elena couldn't quite identify crossing his features. About that, he began. I was thinking of arriving a bit earlier than planned. Would that work with your schedule? Of course, Elena said, surprised. How much earlier? 3 weeks from now instead of 6, Alex replied. There's something specific I want to do while I'm there, and the timing in May would be better. Curiosity piqued. Elena tried to read his expression through the screen. Is everything okay? Everything's perfect, Alex assured her. I just miss you, and an opportunity came up to handle some business in Mexico City sooner rather than later. Though not entirely convinced by his explanation, Elena decided not to press. Well, I certainly won't complain about seeing you sooner. My apartment is small, but I'll get a hotel room, Alex interrupted. I don't want to disrupt your research routine. They finished the call discussing logistics for his earlier visit, but after disconnecting, Elena found herself puzzling over Alex's slight evasiveness. It wasn't like him to be vague about plans. Still, the prospect of seeing him in just 3 weeks rather than 6 lifted her spirits considerably. That evening at her father's apartment, Elena was still contemplating Alex's change of plans when Francisco interrupted her thoughts. Elena, are you listening? Rosa asked if you'd like more chilies. Oh, yes, please, Elena said, smiling apologetically at her father's partner of 6 months, a warm-hearted kindergarten teacher with a talent for traditional cooking. You seem distracted tonight, Francisco observed, refilling her glass. Trouble with your research? No, the research is going wonderfully, Elena assured him. It's just, Alex changed his visit plans. He's coming sooner, and he seemed a bit mysterious about it. Francisco and Rosa exchanged a glance that Elena didn't miss. What? Do you know something? Me? No, nothing, her father said too quickly. I'm sure he just misses you. 8 months is a long time. Elena narrowed her eyes suspiciously. Papa, you're a terrible liar. Always have been. Francisco sighed, then smiled. You're right, but I promised not to say anything, so I won't. Some surprises should remain surprises. This confirmation that there was indeed a surprise only heightened Elena's curiosity, but she knew better than to press her father when he had given his word. Whatever Alex was planning would reveal itself soon enough. 3 weeks later, Elena waited nervously at Mexico City International Airport, scanning the arrivals gate for Alex's familiar figure. Despite their daily video calls, despite his October and December visits, 8 months of separation had created a strange mixture of intimacy and distance. They knew the details of each other's daily lives but had missed the physical presence, the casual touches, the shared silences that formed the foundation of their connection. When Alex finally emerged, taller than most of the surrounding travelers, Elena felt her heart leap. He spotted her immediately, his face transforming with a smile that erased any uncertainty. They moved toward each other quickly, and then she was in his arms, the familiar scent of him bringing a rush of emotion that made her eyes sting. Elena, he murmured against her hair, holding her tightly. God, I've missed you. Me too, she whispered, unwilling to let go just yet. So much. Eventually, they separated enough to leave the airport, though their hands remained intertwined as they navigated the taxi stand. In the car, Elena studied him, reacquainting herself with the details of his face, noting small changes, a new line at the corner of his eye, a slight tan that suggested he'd spent more time outdoors than usual. "What?" Alex asked, catching her intense gaze. "Just making sure you're real," Elena admitted. "Sometimes our video calls feel like looking at a hologram." Alex lifted their joined hands, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I'm very real," he assured her, "and I intend to prove it thoroughly once we've dropped my bags at the hotel." The promise in his voice sent warmth spreading through her. "The hotel can wait," Elena decided. "I want to show you my apartment first." Alex raised an eyebrow but directed the driver to change course. Once inside her apartment, Elena closed the door and turned to find Alex looking around with interest, noting the books stacked on every surface, the research papers organized in careful piles, the small touches that made the space distinctly hers. "It suits you," he said approvingly. "I can picture you working here." "I can show you my work later," Elena replied, stepping closer. "Right now, I have other priorities." Their reunion was everything she had longed for during the months apart, tender and passionate, familiar yet new, a rediscovery of what had sustained them across the distance. Afterward, lying together in her narrow bed, Elena traced patterns on Alex's chest, reluctant to break the spell of their reconnection with questions about his mysterious change of plans. Alex caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "You're wondering why I came early," he said, reading her thoughts as he so often did. "The thought had crossed my mind," Elena admitted. Alex sat up slightly, reaching for his discarded jacket on the floor beside the bed. From an inner pocket, he withdrew a small box. "This is why," he said simply, placing it in her hand. Elena's breath caught. The box was unmistakably for jewelry, too small for a necklace or bracelet, exactly the right size for... "Alex," she whispered. "Open it," he encouraged gently. With trembling fingers, Elena lifted the lid to reveal a ring, a simple, elegant design with a cushion-cut emerald surrounded by small diamonds. Not ostentatiously large, but undeniably beautiful. "I had planned to wait until May," Alex explained softly, "to do this on our anniversary. But then I spoke with your father in March, and he mentioned a place, a garden at Chapultepec Castle where he proposed to your mother. He thought you might like the connection to her since she's been gone so long." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. Her mother had died when she was 12, and though the memories had faded, the absence remained. That her father and Alex had conspired to create this link across time touched her deeply. "The garden is at its most beautiful in late April," Alex continued, "according to your father, so I rearranged everything to be here now, to ask you in the place where your parents' story began." He took her free hand in his. "Elena Vasquez, this year apart has only confirmed what I already knew, that you are the heart of my life, the person I want to build a future with. Will you marry me?" Elena looked from the ring to his face, seeing in his eyes the same man who had written those heartfelt letters, who had seen her truly from the beginning, who had supported her dreams even when they took her thousands of miles away. "Yes," she said simply, joyfully. "Yes, I will marry you." As Alex slipped the ring onto her finger, Elena thought of the journey that had brought them here, from employer and employee to equals, from strangers to lovers, from separate worlds to a shared future. It had begun with a locked box in an attic, with letters never meant to be read, with a courage neither of them had known they possessed. "I love you," she whispered, her forehead against his. "Not because of grand gestures or expensive gifts, but because you see me. You've always seen me, exactly as I am." "And I love you," Alex replied. "Not despite our differences, but because of the person you've helped me become when I'm with you." Tomorrow, they would visit the garden where her father had proposed to her mother. They would begin to plan a life together that bridged their two worlds. There would be challenges and adjustments, compromises and celebrations. But tonight, in the small apartment filled with books and research and the scent of bougainvillea drifting through the open window, They simply held each other. Two people who had found in each other something neither had been looking for, but both had always needed. The recognition of a soul that sees you completely, loves you unreservedly, and chooses you again and again across any distance. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.